I don't want to be paralyzed by perfection. Back in 2014, I had this artwork that I wanted to finish. It was on watercolor paper, and I used various mediums like inks, color markers, watercolors, and gouaches on it. Although I was really afraid to paint this specific piece because, well, I was afraid I'd eventually screw it up. You see, back in 2014, I was kind of a fuck up. My artwork doesn't sell, and I didn't have a steady job other than the ones I get hired to do, or when someone needs a mural to paint, or that one classmate who remembers I could draw well and they want a family portrait. I also wasn't that confident with my art. I've been through a lot of art styles, all of which I love doing, although not many people bought them. At this point, I've sold less than 5 paintings in my 10 years of being an artist. I've done a lot of group shows, even a one-man show, but I still haven't sold that much art to be able to afford regular food for myself, let alone the art materials, so I could produce more art with. At the time, I was lucky enough that my family helps me a lot in terms of buying art materials, as I may commission pieces for them, but when I show my artwork at galleries, they seldom sell. Either because only a few people understand what I mean in these paintings, or they're too dark and erotic most of the time, or maybe I didn't have collectors yet, or I've overpriced my pieces. Whatever the case may be, I'm still not where I wanted to be at this point, and it sucked as I remember it now. Going back to the artwork I was painting, it was about a young woman. It was a photo of a beautiful Japanese gravure model which I juxtaposed on some mixture of Marvel comic book artworks, TV show characters, and movie screen captures, and a ton more photos of women, nude and dressed, that I grabbed all over the internet. I composed it as such as the main woman, Yaya-chan, was in the middle of all the chaos behind her. The background was loud, but they had a matching red and pink color scheme, and it was chaotic, but there was a kaleidoscope aspect to it too, having each piece mirror each other, therefore having some serenity in the chaos. The whole background was very detailed, which brings out the softness of the skin of the beautiful girl in the middle of it all, as if she was laying on top of a carpet filled with cartoon characters smashed with pornography, magazines, and the TV guide. Suffice it to say that this was a bit ambitious to paint. I know, because creating the study and looking at it wasn't helping, because I can see already how much work and concentration it would take to accomplish it, not to mention the time it would take me to complete this. Having a study for your artwork is helpful, but it also lets you know how much work you need to do, and to have a study for this kind of detailed artwork, it's like a roadmap to Mount Everest. Though in my case, imagine there's a commentary on every step you make that's saying how hard it is, and it just keeps getting harder. My doubting voice is so loud I can't even lift my brush. I've done many detailed artworks before, especially when I was still a kid. I drew and colored on illustration boards using markers, and have already impressed a lot of people with what I've accomplished with them at a very young age. Although growing up, you get to have doubts. You think you might have lost it, and it's quite true, especially if you've changed careers for artists. Either you've stopped entirely and just gone back at it again, or have changed mediums. And that was the case for me. I changed mediums. When I was a kid up until my freshman college years, I made artwork using paper and pens. For the other half of my college years and up to the point of the story, I was always painting with oil paints on canvas, and these two are very different beasts. The shift was because, as stated earlier, I barely had enough money to buy art materials, and my oil paintings work didn't sell as much as I wanted to. Oil paints and canvases, if you didn't know, were quite expensive. Add to the fact that I paint huge artworks, 4x8 feet or larger. I do have smaller pieces, but I have a lot of them, too many to be exact. And it's eating all the space I had in the studio. That's what you get when no one buys your art. And so I decided to shift to pen and paper again. It's cheaper to buy, and faster to make. The canvas and oil paint costs double and even triple what watercolor paper and a couple of markers and inks cost, and I also want to get back to my comic book drawing and coloring roots. Plus it's easier to store because paper's thin. I could store 100 of them in the same space as one of my huge canvases accumulate. But herein lies the catch. Painting with oil paints, I could go wild with it, do strokes boldly, while not minding all the splatter and mist marks I make. I could always paint it over with no problem. And in oils, the canvas is very sturdy. You can add and add paint or even scratch it with your palette knife for some kind of effect, and it won't damage the canvas. And painting on a big canvas gives me more room to maneuver and place it on an angle as it stands on its own. All of these features are not to be applied on watercolor paper. The paper is delicate. You can overwater your paper, and you will damage it irreparably. You even might burn a hole through it. You can't go hard on it as you might scratch off the paper, and it will be seen no matter how many layers of paint you put in. Speaking of layers, you can't put too many unintentional layers to it too, because watercolor and the mediums I use cannot overlap too much, otherwise the colors will be muddy, and your intended colors will not shine or show as much. It's a different discipline, to the point that watercolor is painted on top of a table, not on an easel. And the worst part is, I have to be delicate painting it, not the madman or beast I turn into when I paint with oils. It's like making love to a different woman. In oil it's rough or wild sex, she's screaming in pleasure, and the lights turned on. But with watercolors, it's quiet sex under the covers with the lights turned off. Both are still amazing, but if you switch them up, you'll end up with a bad time in bed. With that said, I'm wild in bed, and I'm aiming to pleasure a quiet woman who likes quiet but passionate sex. And I gotta tell you, this is not easy to do. All your tricks and moves from before that always gave you the win doesn't work here. In fact, they're no good here, downright prohibited. I'm quite a messy painter. I smoke cigarettes while I paint, and I don't wash my brushes, and I don't clean my palette after painting. I'm the bad boy type in oils, but I can't tell you enough how it doesn't work with watercolors. Hence my fear. I had this beautiful study I have already sketched perfectly onto paper, and all I need is to paint in the colors, but as I colored in the parts, a fear grew inside me every day. I controlled my wild beast. I painted as much as I can, slowly, being able to repair whatever damage I made or mistakes that I did onto the paper, due to my feral nature on the leaf. I was still trying to learn the discipline, but I was far from there. And every time I stopped painting for the night, I would hang the paper artwork like one would dry clothes on a special hanging device. There I'd see how much I still need to do, and how this map to Mount Everest is far from over, and hell is still about to come. But the fear of screwing up this magnificent artwork to be, the fear of not being able to commit a mistake, and not being able to erase it like I normally do on a canvas with oils, the fear crept up on me so badly, that I let the artwork hang there for days, even weeks, even more than a month. I sat there always looking at the artwork, admiring it, and then looking at the study I made and seeing them both, noticing the miles I need to go, and then saying to myself, I could never do this. I could never paint it this perfectly. Maybe I should just give up now and call the artwork finished. I know some artists who leave the artwork half done, calling it finished. I'm not sure if that's intentional, if they're afraid like me, or if it's a real art style, or if they don't know what else to put in, so they stop midway and call it done. Or maybe they're just really lazy. Back to my artwork, I kept thinking, there are already some colored parts in it, and the pretty lady in the middle is already beautiful in pencil. I can just say that this is what I intended to do in the beginning. I'm good at making up stories anyway, right? I really can't afford to make a mistake, especially in painting the face of the girl who was so alluring and delicate, that I would just screw it up like most of my artwork. Like how I've just screwed up my art career by not being on time submitting paintings and going beyond the deadline, and not submitting stellar pieces with even a rickety canvas frame. Like how I screwed my life up by courting the wrong girls and making love to those who I didn't feel anything for. All these thoughts bogged my mind as I looked at the unfinished painting. I felt I was a collection of screw-ups and fuck-ups, that I am not cut out to paint something this intricate. That I'd be doing all these detailed parts, and then in the end when it's time to paint the face, I'll screw it up, and then all my efforts turn to shit, just like my life has been so far at that point. And that paralyzed me for quite some time, that I didn't touch the painting, and it even hurt to look at and think about it. In the end, however, I thought to myself, this is no way to go. I can't have it end this way. And so then I thought, I don't want to be paralyzed by perfection. I thought, fuck it. I'm going to do it. So what if I make a mistake? At least I tried. So what if I don't get it at 100%? I'm not a robot. I can make mistakes. And if I do, I'll make changes. I'll fix it. I'm still improving, and if people point out this mistake or that mistake, I'll say, fuck you. You do it better. You try and pay like this. I felt so energized, defeating that self-doubting and self-defeating voice, finally standing up to it, and my fears that I was shaking, and best of all, I started painting. With this renewed power and courage coursing through my veins alongside this new mantra repeating in my mind, I realized that all this bullshit I was thinking of about this piece to be perfect, the way it is in my head, that picture will never come to be, or no wait, it can come to be. As long as I keep painting and keep trying, no matter how many times, it will manifest, it will materialize. And it only won't come to be if I sat there and did nothing and did not finish the painting. If I was forever paralyzed with perfection. And you know what? I was able to finish the painting. And it's one of my favorite pieces. It's called Soft Machine, referring to a woman's vagina. Well, I don't mean to say women are just machines or toys, because all our bodies are somewhat machines if you think about it. All I mean is, the softest machine is the woman's gentle parts. The woman is soft, gentle, and loving, like the watercolor paper. You have to treat her gently and be firm with her at the same time, and match her intricacies so that you can produce something beautiful together. That's just me, and it encompassed the story of how I approach the paper. Even if I'm more accumulated in oils, the soft machine could also be the brush or my mind thinking thoughts of perfection. Who really knows? The point is, I was able to finish the piece, and I'm proud of it. The fears I had, of people pointing out my mistakes, well, I didn't get any of them. All I got were praises, and a lot of the comments were like, what kind of drugs were you snorting when you did this? I only answer laughing, but deep inside my answer is, fuck perfection. There's a saying, we can never really be perfect, no one can, but we should all still aim to be perfect. And that's true. I might say fuck perfection or axe perfection. I even made a shirt of that. But in the end, I try for my artwork to be perfect as it can be. The lesson is when you don't achieve it, it's quite okay. And another lesson is, don't be paralyzed by it. If you want something truly great, don't your excuse be, I won't be able to do it, because it won't live up to what I have in my head. Well, nothing ever is. All we ever really produce when it comes from our heads is just second best, expectations vs reality, as some internet memes say, and reality always wins. But failing to make what's in your head or vision and landing on something close to it is far better than the idea in your brain that doesn't materialize, because we never move to make it into our reality because of fear of imperfection. After this experience, I was able to overcome my fear of perfection and have a new outlook on it. Sure, I've mistakes still, but more are wins than losses. I now sell a lot of artwork, at least 1 or 2 sold artworks or books in a week. And all of them are watercolor artworks. Imagine if I had given up, thrown my arms up, and said that watercolor is not for me, where would I be now? I've exhibited in numerous galleries with my watercolor artworks, and in 2021, I just exhibited at the prestigious 𝐏𝐀𝐑𝐀𝐃 Museum in Baguio, and sold a lot of watercolor artworks, almost selling everything I showed. Out of the 60 plus artworks I exhibited, only 20 came back. And one of the main pieces there was a huge 3x4 feet watercolor artwork, with the most detail I've ever done in an artwork. It's called Blum, and it depicted hundreds if not thousands of people in the wet market of Blumentritt. If you see that painting, you will be in awe of how much work it took for it to be done. But I did it, thanks to my mantra and a new mindset of not being paralyzed with perfection. Suffice it to say that, if you're paralyzed by perfection, imagine if you weren't. Imagine if you had no fear and just did your best with what you have right now. It might end up being good or bad, but nothing will come out of it for sure, if you only think about it, and not pull your idea out of your head and finally materialize it into our reality.